Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
With your host, certified Cicerone Michael Agnew.
And Laura Mosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beers specially paired with their work.
This month is performance poet Tony Plocido.
So sit back,
pop a cold one,
and dive into some books
and brews.
All right, 1, 2, 3. We're going.
Welcome everybody to episode, what is this? Episode what?
This is number 12, which means, Tony, you have the honor of finishing up our first year as a podcast.
Wow. Episode number 12. 1 year.
Episode 12.
And
we started April of last year with Lauren Nemi, and so you're rounding up the year, first year of the podcast.
And
we
this
should have brought a birthday cake or something.
This is an interesting episode because it is the COVID-19 shelter in place episode. So we are in separate spaces recording this on Skype, which we've never done before. So we'll see how this goes.
Hopefully the sound quality is good. So apart from, everybody dying around us, how's your month been, Michael?
Apart from that, my month has been pretty good.
That's good to hear.
I can't think of anything special that's happened, but it's been pretty good.
Apart from the worldwide pandemic.
I'm getting good enough at banjo now.
That's right.
Here's what I'm thinking of doing. I have to see if I can actually pull this off. I'm thinking for our outro music at the end of this episode, I am going to play us out.
Oh, that is exciting. Do you have your banjo there with you?
No. Well, I mean, I'm in my office. The banjo is in the office, but...
Okay. So you'll play the banjo later and add it in to play us out.
Yeah, it'll be recorded, and I'll just insert it in the editor.
All right. Sounds like a plan. And because this is the question burning on everybody's mind, how's your toilet paper supply?
We got plenty. My girlfriend thought ahead and bought some well in advance, so we're good to go.
We were fine, but the fact is we have 7 people in the house.
Yeah, you got a lot of people.
Yeah. 7. Yeah, one of my sons got sent home from college, and I already had 5 kids living here. So, 3 in high school still, and 2 adults that live with me, and then 1 came home. So, but luckily, this is the definition of, a friendly divorce in 2020. My ex-husband brought us toilet paper today, so.
Nice.
Yeah, but we did have some very exciting news. My college son came home, and he had a job within 36 hours, so that was good. Because I teach music lessons. I lost everything. I lost my job. I lost my investments. So in that sense, it's not a great month. But my daughter earned her PhD this month.
I saw that on Facebook.
You saw that, yes. And I said the wrong thing on Facebook. It's actually cognitive psychology. So that was pretty exciting. So, yeah. How about you, Tony?
My shows got canceled.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty much the worst thing that can happen to me right now.
Uh-huh.
I'm not really built for isolationist lifestyle. Last night I got to the point where I think I broke a little bit because I decided I can't be in the house anymore, but it was raining outside, so I went to Pizza Luce, ordered a slice of pizza to go, then drove to a park and parked in the parking lot and just looked at the park while it rained.
That's
At
nice.
least
And I said,
do you work from home?
yes.
Oh, okay. So that because I'm quite happy in my house. I have my instruments. I have my laptop to do my writing. I need
sure.
Something else. I'm happy in the house. So I'm one of those who's not that bothered by not. In fact, it's relaxing, and I hate to say it, but I'm not running all the time.
Well, I forgot the part of the story where my internet was out, so I had nothing to do.
So you couldn't either?
I couldn't do anything. I suppose people are like, all my writer friends are like, well, you could have written. I was like, I don't write with a pen. I write with a computer. It's 2020.
So I did. One thing I did do is start baking bread.
Really?
Yeah. And what's funny is a really surprise panic buy for me. I don't understand why this is a panic buy, but yeast. The yeast that I had in my freezer had a Best By date of May 2011. So the first loaf I made didn't quite rise well. And I couldn't get any yeast. Fortunately, a friend of mine had some that he could throw my way. What have you been reading?
You know what? I've been reading job wanted ads. Help wanted. That's really what I've been reading because, you know, for the time being, they cut off the music lessons really early at the community centers. So I've basically been out of work for 2 weeks already. So I'm doing some teaching by Skype, but mainly I'm looking at help wanted, trying to decide, you know, what are you qualified to be teaching music lessons for 30 years. So, not much plot development there, not much characterization.
Well, I read a great book called Evidence of V by Sheila O'Connor. It is a gorgeous book. So basically, she's imagining the story of her maternal grandmother. Yeah. Who nobody knew was her maternal grandmother. Because her grandmother had become pregnant at 15 in the 1930s and was basically sentenced and imprisoned at the Home for Wayward Girls in Sauk Center, Minnesota, until she was 21.
That you brought that up this month because, wow.
So it's just little fragments of evidence of this person, and then Sheila O'Connor kind of weaves a story, imagining what her grandmother's life was, just based on these little fragments. So it's a fictional based on little morsels.
Right. It sounds like a really cool concept. Yeah. But it was so funny. I don't know if I told you in email, but I had just like 2 or 3 days before you mentioned her book, been at Mothers of Marines convention. Yeah. And our featured speaker was actually a woman who has turned that exact girls' school or girls' home into a place for healing veterans now. Yeah. It's called Bull's Nest. So I thought that was a really funny coincidence. But who do we have today? Our guest is Tony Plocido, and I've known Tony a long time, so I'm excited to have him here. Tony Plocido is the author of 3 collections of poetry. The first, Sucker Punch Wisdom, was published with 2 other Kansas City poets. His other books are Aging and Other Side Projects in 2016 and Felt This Way So Many Times in 2018. His writing also, did I get that right?
No, it's just felt this so many times.
What did I?
Not felt this way so many times.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm adding words. I do have it down correctly. His writing can also be found in the 2019 Martin Lake Journal, Startled by Joy, woohoo, I published that, and 2019 Talking Stick by Jack Pine Press. March 2019, he became the host and curator of the long-running showcases Poets and Pints and Writers Read. He is also a board member for Cracked Walnut, the local chapter of the League of Minnesota Poets, and you can find his work on his personal website, Mental Valley. So,
nice.
Welcome, Tony.
Thank you.
What is our first beer, Michael?
Okay, our first beer is a very special one. This is why I said you're never going to find this. So this is Sam Adams' Utopias. And I'm just going to show you this bottle here, shaped like a brewer's copper, like a brewing kettle.
Yeah, it's really cool.
This is, this bottle, 22 ounces, retails for like $200.
Really? Had I found it, I would not have bought it.
Oh, no, you wouldn't have bought it. It is a 29% alcohol kind of barrel-aged blending of many beers. It's still, it's not carbonated. Even they make their special glasses for it.
Wow.
It's kind of like, I would describe its flavor as mapley cognac.
I'm really upset that I'm not there now.
I know. That's when this happened. I was like, oh,
you did this on
but
purpose,
I will say, this is all that I had left. So,
I don't appreciate that you describe it and are going to drink it in front of us.
I'm going to drink it right in front of you. So this is a beer. It's blended from a whole bunch of different beers in barrels, some of which have been in barrels like 20 years. It is, they make it every other year. It's the beer that beer nerds go completely crazy for. Although, you know, you do better to buy a good bottle of cognac, but it would be better than this, but it is delightful. For a long time, it was the highest alcohol beer in the world, but it's since been way surpassed. It is still an extremely expensive beer. Now, I got this bottle because I used to be on the good Sam Adams media list, and they would send me, they make it every other year, and they would just send me a bottle. They don't anymore. I'm not on that good list anymore.
You do?
I don't know. I guess I'm no longer an important influencer.
Aw, that's a shame.
So I paired this because this first poem is very contemplative. The image that came to mind, contemplative in a kind of dark way. And the image that came to mind for me, I see a lone person sitting at a table with something in a snifter, just kind of thinking about where they've been, where they are, and where they're going, and maybe aren't all that happy with it. That's so I wanted something big and sniftery, and I had this little bit of this in the basement, so cheers.
Well, we'll enjoy watching you drink. Go ahead.
Yep.
How do I like this beer?
You actually probably would like this beer. Do you like cognac or brandy?
I like some brandy. There is now remind me, whiskey is a type of brandy or brandy is a type of whiskey. Which way is it?
Neither.
Yeah, I was going to say neither.
Are you okay? I'll have to look this up then. What are the two that are like that? Yeah, I lost you, huh?
But if you like those things, then you would like this. All right, okay, let's hear the poem, Tony.
Yep.
Okay. So this is from the second book, Aging and Other Side Projects. It's actually one of the reasons why I called it that. It's called The Loose Loop in My Sweater. I am aging. My memories are no longer in color. They are raging black and white, visions and nights where I drank too much time. My mind spun with the clock on the wall, and it all should have been better. I still have a sweater with a loose loop of yarn from when I was young. It's hung in the 20-some closets I've had since that shirt got snagged. So frivolous in how I zagged and I zigged. It was vagabondage with privilege. But with all that movement, part of my life missed the target. It's far-fetched to think that I possibly took it all in. That there aren't some sins that I left on the table because I was unable to see the forest for the trees. Life isn't short, but it's fleeting, and I'll be damned if I know the meaning. These words float with me, like the ghost of a friend who just gets me. I've been running out of time for 29 or 30 years now. It's crazy how different fear feels now. It used to be an engine, now it's the weight, the great invisible monster that only fosters rigidity. The id in me barely wants pleasure. But you can measure life in tears or fears or places you've been. Why then have I felt the need to see my life in the way of a picture? Its structure was created when I was young, and it's hung on a mental wall, and it's all I ever wanted. It's this 16 by 20. It's sunny. There's me, my wife, and kids. We have 3. I have this perfect backyard. The kind where it's hard to imagine how I ever lived in an apartment. There's a large fence and the kids are playing. My wife isn't saying anything. She just looks at me until I see the kind of love that people write poems about. I figured it out, that it only seems simple. In reality, it takes every part of me to even imagine the picture. This mixture of emotions has got me reeling, and there's a small feeling of falling apart. I didn't start life this way, full of dismay, regret, and bullshit, but somehow I've hit this note of loathing. I keep folding in on myself when I should blossom. I think back on the awesome, those nights where I drank too much time. Unfortunately, my mind only remembers the spaces.
Wow, you know, I recognize now your poetry needs to be heard, not read.
Yes. Yeah. One
I mean,
thing,
it's great
I don't
read,
know,
but hearing it is like, whoa.
because Tony is a performer, and
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that really jumped out to me when I first met you, Tony, was that I'd been to a lot of open mic readings where people stood up and read from a sheet. And I'm not criticizing because I really... well, you know, I mean, I do the same thing, and the more open mics I went to, the more I realized, wait a second, you should do more than just stand there and read. And I've been to your poetry workshops, and I don't think I'm a good performer. So were I not teaching, I'm not teaching anymore. I would go to your workshops every month because, yes, Tony is a performer. So, and it really does make all the difference. So I love this poem. You know, it's poignant, it's reflective. And I think one of the powers of art is it's a way to talk about life and some important things without lecturing. It's sort of a gentle way to get people to think deeper thoughts. And so my question is, what sets someone of your relative youth to pondering what it is to look back from old age? Because I agree with Michael. To me, this sounds like an old man, you know, in his at least late 60s, if not into his 70s or later.
I wouldn't even put it that late. I would put it, I mean, me being mid-50s, I would say 50s into 60s.
Let me ask you, how old do you think I am?
Actually, I have an unfair advantage because I believe you and I discussed this one night when we went out with the group. So I think that you are about 10 years younger than me.
Well, I don't know how old you are.
That doesn't answer the question, Laura.
See, now I'm telling you.
I'm 44, so.
So I was close to right. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I'm just past 51.
There you go.
So yeah, I was about right. But to me, that's relatively young.
Well, to answer your question, keep going. Sorry.
No, that was it. Because like I said, to me, this poem sounds like someone, even if you take Michael's 55, to me, this sounds like someone at least in their 60s looking back and really reflecting on life. And you wrote this, at least 5 years ago?
I wrote this in 2016.
Okay, so barely into your 40s. I'm losing track of the years. Still in your 30s? Kind of
in
right?
my 40s. I was in my 40s.
Okay.
But I was 40.
Okay.
But the reason, so I had hit 40. So when I was young, I was the only one of my friends that ever wanted to have kids. And I had this whole vision, the one I kind of paint in that poem, of what my life would be like. I would find that person. I would have kids. I would have the yard where people came to for barbecues. Mm-hmm. Like, I would be that guy.
Yeah.
I've got none of those things, you know? And so for me, it's, and I got friends who all have kids who didn't want them. So for me, it's like, yeah.
No.
I mean, they like their kids now.
Right. No, I know what you mean, but didn't.
But back then they didn't want kids.
Yeah.
So for me, it's one of those things. And now, the the door is closing. It's not closed. I get it. I got all kinds of time technically, but if I had a kid tomorrow, I'd be 62 when they graduated.
Yep.
So that's kind of getting up there for me. And so that's where that came from, was like, okay, so this door closed, or is closing. And there was too much time where I spent. The line about drinking too much time was a little bit about drinking, though I've never actually been a huge drinker. Mm-hmm. It just sounded better than smoking too much time. So, because it kind of sounds like drinking too much wine is the whole point of it.
I love that line. And what were you thinking when you wrote that? You were sort of thinking about this concept of drinking wine, but...
Well, just drinking, like just lounging away the days and doing nothing, and, just being a 20-something, like my 20s are mostly a waste of time. Mm-hmm. I didn't do anything significant, and I spent a lot of time just bouncing from place to place to place, and it was just, there's life lessons I've learned, sure, but there wasn't any accomplishment there. Mm-hmm. In fact, I've spent a lot of time since then fixing that time period. Mm-hmm. So that's what that was about.
Okay. So in a way, then your whole book begins to make sense. It sort of sprang from those ideas, this idea of aging. See, from the start, because I think the first time I met you was at the Art Shanties Project, and you had given me a copy of that book. And I really like that poetry. And I always assumed it was based on maybe an elderly relative or something like that. Idea, looking back. But, I think some people would say that's what it is to be an old soul, that you don't necessarily have to be 60 to start reflecting on life. And some people... I often say I was born with midlife crisis. By the time I was 6, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm wasting my life away. I haven't done anything with myself yet. So I know that you especially wanted to come on for April because it's National Poetry Month. So do you want to tell I think we're up to 5.1 million viewers or listeners about National Poetry Month and why it was started?
Well, the first thing I want to tell, if you have that many listeners, is that if you're in Minneapolis on the third Wednesday of every month, come to Sisyphus Brewery and come to my show, which is Poets and Pints. But I say that to say this. We had a big show planned for this month, and we're going to have to reevaluate how we're going to do it. I think we're going to do it over Zoom, which would be significantly worse.
It's not ideal.
No, but I still have to talk to all the people I had scheduled to be on the show to see who wants to do that, or if they'd rather be scheduled another month. So I don't really want to announce necessarily who's going to be on the show, but National Poetry Month now that I have a poetry show of my own, I just wanted to do something special. And I was going to bring in writers from the different writing groups around town that I know. There's a ton more. I didn't by no means claim to have found them all. But I had somebody from the Asian American Literary Collective. I had somebody from Palabristas, which is a Latinx one. I had one from the Warrior Writers, which is all vets. I had somebody from Mac House, which is mostly people of color. And then I was going to have somebody from Nerve Poets and the Diamond City Coffee House, and then we had a big time main event act to close the show. It was going to be fun.
That does sound like a good one.
Yeah, that would have been great.
Stupid COVID thing.
Yeah. Well, we are definitely ready for beer number 2.
Okay.
And so, Michael, what is our second beer?
Second beer is from... Whoa.
Oops. What happened?
Second beer wants out of the can.
Time to crack mine open, too.
Okay, and I... Just sipping that up, I know exactly why it wants out of the can. So, this is Salted Nut Roll Ale from Tim Whiskers Brewery in St. Paul.
Is it good?
No.
That's not a strong selling point.
It's one of my favorite candy bars, for sure.
And it's actually even worse than it's supposed to be now that I'm tasting this.
Well, I haven't tasted it yet, and you've destroyed my hopes and dreams.
Well, I hope that yours is better than mine.
Okay, well, I'll do the click of the glasses here. There we go. How's yours?
Okay, so this Tin Whiskers in St. Paul. They work a lot with Pearson's Candy Company that makes the salted nut roll, the famous Minnesota candy.
Oh, I love that. Minnesota.
No, they're really good.
Yeah.
It's a Minnesota specialty. They also have made a mint. What are the Pearson's mint patties? They made a mint patty beer, which was hard to drink because it was all mint. But so this is one they worked with them to recreate in beer the salted nut roll. This is made with peanut butter, salted caramel, and vanilla. And then some.
So it's a candy bar.
Also some caramely malts and so forth. Very low hops. They sent me 2 cans of this, and what I'm noticing in this one is the same thing I noticed in the first one, is that it's sour. It isn't supposed to be sour.
I don't think mine is.
So yours?
I don't think
I got some infected cans. That's why it wanted out of the can. That's why it sort of foamed up like that, because there's some sort of infection going on in there. So it tastes nothing like a salted nut roll, at least what I have.
Well, I think what I have, I can taste a bit of that. And, I think normally I don't like the lighter colored beers, but I do sort of like this one.
Okay, well, maybe if it tastes the way it's supposed to, it's better than what I've got in my glass right now.
Yes.
So the reason I picked this... this poem, to me, was all about just carrying stuff around. I mean, it literally is about carrying stuff around. But particularly carrying around emotional baggage is how I read it. In beer, there is such a thing as the kitchen sink beer, they're called. And it's kind of a thing where the brewer throws everything at a beer, like too many ingredients. Usually, kitchen sink beers aren't particularly good because there's just too much there. You lose complexity and end up with just a muddled cluster of mess. So I was looking for a kitchen sink beer for this because it's a beer that's just carrying everything, that's overloaded with stuff. This one struck me that way because there's a lot of stuff in this. There are a lot of different malts in this. There's peanut butter, caramel, vanilla. So there's a lot of things happening in here. And to me, for my palate, it's too much. So it kind of breaks the beer by overloading it. So that's my concept behind this salted nut roll cream ale pairing.
So, this poem is called Expense. It is from your third book, right? Tony felt this so many times.
Yep. All right, Expense. I am one of those people that always has 5 things in his pocket. Sometimes it's just 2 or 3. The point is I'm always carrying weight. The weight of things I'm never going to need. Sometimes it's chapstick, and sometimes it's an overwhelming desire to flee. Sometimes it's 35 cents, and sometimes it's an anger at always just being the fat kid. And sometimes it's a note to myself telling me, forget you ever knew her. Every day I shake it off. I say things like, you've made it this far, Dumpy, why not keep on walking? Or, buy that sandwich. The cost is minimal compared to the joy you'll feel. I can't help but think that all this talk comes at an expense. Eventually the window will break, even if you're only throwing the tiniest of pebble. I have to be ready to answer the question, what if all the costs are real?
Very nice. Another very reflective poem.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things I like about your poetry. It's, you know, it's not too obvious. It's not too, you know, let's say shallow, you know, it's not about light things, but it's also not so out there that people are like, what are you even talking about? You know, it takes a little bit of thought, and yet it's accessible, I believe we say in poetry. So one of the things I wondered is I kind of went through the progression of this poem from this analogy of both figurative and literal weight to these questions. I really wondered, I was thinking about Catherine Kaiser, who we interviewed, second or third interview?
Yeah, well,
she was talking about how she sometimes will spend up to a year on a poem. Is this something that just flows from you as is, or did you really plan out this progression?
No, I am a very much I don't edit my poetry and I don't spend time on it. I spit it out in 15 minutes or I don't have a poem.
Wow.
Okay. And so were these thoughts in your head before you sat down to write it, of taking this idea of physical and literal weight and going to these questions?
Two things. Well, one, and so the funny story about this poem is that, first of all, the last line, what if all the costs are real? Mm-hmm. When I wrote it, I thought I was actually taking that line from a musician that I like, a guy named Dermot Kennedy. Mm-hmm. And I was like, because I heard him say that in a song, and I was like, that is a cool thing to say. And how can I use it? And I don't have any shame in using a line from somebody.
Mm-hmm. Well,
but later,
practice.
What?
I said it used to be standard practice that musicians would freely borrow bits and pieces of his work and so on.
Oh, they still do. But then I actually looked up the lyrics because he's a very Irishman. And he says, what if all the costs are even? So I didn't actually even steal the line. So that made me happy. And it's actually, it's on the back of this book is that line. I have to be ready to answer the question, what if all the costs are real? But also I had chapstick and 35 cents in my pocket at the time. So that came out too. But
I misread that poem. You had $35.
No, 35 cents. There's a period in there.
But after all, what was I thinking?
And if I knew the keyboard stroke to make the cent symbol, I probably would have, but I didn't feel like looking it up, and I don't know it off the top of my head. So Mike Finley, and hopefully one of my favorite people.
Yeah, he's great. He's a great performer too. Hopefully we'll have him on sometime. I've kind of talked to him, but we haven't finished the conversation. He left a review for Felt This Way So Many Times, and he says this collection is, and I quote, a catalog of the hurt and desire that are the earmarks of his ragged generation. Do you think, Tony, that you are of a ragged generation?
Yeah, I'm a Gen Xer, so that's kind of what we're known for is Nirvana and, grunge music that's all about hurt. But yeah.
So do you think that hurt and desire are hallmarks of your generation? And if so, why? Why more
I think
your generation than, say, mine, even though I'm only a few years older?
I think we were in that perfect generation where we decided to, I think we're the first generation that I remember hearing about where we're just like, you know what? We're just going to chill out and see what happens as opposed to getting all up in arms about anything. Mm-hmm. Not that there weren't protesters. There's always protesters in every situation. But I think that's how a lot of Gen Xers got to be known as slackers. And grunge was lazy dress. But it wasn't lazy music, actually. It's pretty complicated music. But I took to it because I thought it was neat that people telling quote-unquote rock stories were just telling them from on the radio and everywhere around you was all this glam rock, people wearing makeup and, all this stuff. And when this other thing came out and it was, and not that grunge is the only aspect of Gen X, but it was one that I gravitated to. It just was this thing where we're just like, we don't need to dress ourselves up. We don't need to paint our face. We don't need to even worry about what we're wearing. We're just living life here and trying to get through. And I don't know. And I was just graduating from high school at the time, but of grunge coming out. But I don't know.
Do you think that sort of goes to your question at the end of this poem, where you say, what was it? Maybe
what if all the costs are real?
What if all the costs are real? Because, see, to me, I would never think to write that, because maybe it's because, like I said, I was born with midlife crisis, saying, you know, how do things balance out? How does this affect us? But maybe that is very much a generational thing. If you're saying that your generation just said, chill and relax, don't worry about anything, and now you're saying, but maybe there were costs. Maybe
I am saying that. I would say that this particular piece is probably not speaking to my generation per se, as much as just what if my own actions had costs. Then I'm just, I'm treating it like, what if it's this or what if it's that? And through most of that poem, I'm kind of just doing, it could be this, it could be that. But at the end, I'm like, well, I have to put weight on these things. They have value and weight, and I have to remember that.
So, excuse me, the description of this book says these poems being written within such a short span. I should add for what are we up to, 5.2 million viewers. It's gone up since we've been talking. So thank you, Tony. You're helping us out here. This book is a little different because all of these were written within a very short time, as opposed to some of your other collections.
1 year, yeah.
Yeah, and it says that calls you to seek different forms than just the performance-based poetry of the past two books. So I've been to your classes on performing poetry, and I love them. But sort of define for all these millions of listeners what exactly performance-based poetry is.
I don't know. I think the word based, I don't know that I would put in there, because it's not that it's necessarily performance based. Mm-hmm. It is performance poetry. It's that it lends itself to adding acting skills. And that's what I like to do. Is I've been an actor in the past, not really since high school, but I have some tools and some skills and some knowledge in it, and I like to put those into my poems, and especially when I'm on stage, because it's just infinitely more interesting to me when people do that.
I agree.
There's so many great poems that I've read, then I finally get the chance to hear the author do it, and they don't do it justice, and I'm heartbroken by it, because I'm like, now I have to create this character for you in my head, and I don't think I should have to do that.
And who was it we were talking with, Michael, in the last month or two, that we were talking about the arts playing off each other? I think it was Tim Young, and how a musician will take a poem and create a piece of music, and then an artist will take that piece of music and create a painting, and, Mussorgsky takes the painting and creates a symphony. So I don't think that's a bad thing. We're not all blessed with all the skills. Like I said, I don't think I can read poetry to save my life. At least, I can read it, obviously, but not to do it really well, to draw the listener in like you do. And so I really appreciate that. But what forms did you find that you sought out for this book?
As far as, you mean poetic forms?
Well, going back to this description from the book, that it caused you to seek different forms than just performance of the past. Well,
it was more just, I didn't have time, I guess the way you read it, it's not what I did. More, it was that I didn't have time to worry about how am I going to do this poem on stage, because there's a lot of poems that didn't make it into the second book or the first book. Mm-hmm. Because I was just like, how would I ever read this to people? Like, maybe it's messed the way I wrote it. It has funny things on the page or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's a very visual poem. So there's a lot of things that got scrapped because I'm like, I want to be able to grab this book, go up on stage, rip it open to any page and read it and make it interesting for everybody in the audience. I want people to love the 10 minutes that I have and to remember that I had 10 minutes on stage. And so this book, I didn't have time for that. I won the book in a slam in Kansas City that was the prize. There was no money, but you get to put out a book. And I had just put out a book 4 months before that. So I was like, I actually tried to give it back to the guy. I was like, wow, I just put out a book. I don't have anything to do. He's like, well, you have a year. Better get writing. I was like, all right, I will do that. And so I did that. And so now I have I like what happened. I was very worried about it because I'd never really written for the page before. And these are very much for the page.
I think it came out well. So we are ready for beer 3. Michael, is beer 3.
Okay. So this isn't actually a beer. This is a cider. Aspall dry English cider. I picked the cider for this. I said earlier that I wanted to do these poems in a particular progression because I saw there was like a progression of mood from poem to poem. So you start with this kind of dark contemplative thing. You move to the idea of carrying things around, but it's not so dark. It's kind of, I do this. And then you've got this last poem, which is like, as the title says, awakening. It sort of takes you out of where we've been thus far. Into the light.
It's my hippie poem.
Yeah. So I wanted something that was more celebratory, more light, more, let's pop the corks. I'm a beer guy, not a wine guy, so I couldn't do champagne. But cider is one of those, it's a drink that is, in its making, is more like wine, in that it's fermented pressed juice. But in its culture is more like beer. So I am a huge cider fan. This is a very dry, sparkling cider, so it is kind of like spritzy, like you're drinking champagne, except it's apples instead of grapes. So,
all right.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oops, let me get my glasses in there. Hopefully your microphone picked that up on the other side of the Twin Cities.
I heard it.
Delicious. Well, apples.
Mine is delicious. I couldn't find the same one that you had, so I have Angry Orchard hard cider, crisp apple. I was asking the manager at Hy-Vee, what's a dry cider, and I had a million questions for him, and I finally took pity on the poor guy and let him, go help other customers. And I chose mine by price. So you had a much more profound reason for your choice. Yes. Okay. Tony, Awakened, and this is new material. It's not in any book yet, correct?
Yeah, it's actually a year old this month because I wrote it last April. But yeah, it's not in a book.
Okay.
So
go ahead.
And I actually wrote this during a poetry reading, which is kind of rude, but anyway, here we go.
I'm not going to ask who was reading while you wrote it.
I don't remember. Okay, it's called Awakened. If you can't find the time in the middle of the night to build yourself up when no one's watching, you will notice the deterioration, the slow melt of time. Oh, I'm not saying it will get better. I don't know if it will. I do know that it can get better. They say there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. But it's not at the end of the tunnel. The light is everywhere but the tunnel. So stay out of the tunnel. Tell yourself that every wrinkle is a story, not a curse. Clean the mirror before you use it. Your reflection has earned that much because you're up now. And the wee hours are when people can feel small. But you're a giant in your world. Every last bit of you deserves to be awakened.
A very positive poem.
Yes.
So I took this, well, once again, it's another poem of reflection. I took it as a comment on changing our thoughts on choosing to see the positive, but the fun of poetry sometimes is what I get out of it isn't necessarily what the poet meant. So is that what you were thinking, or what were you thinking as you wrote it?
It was definitely thinking that if you believe it will be fine, it will be fine. But it's also, I know a lot of people that do self-body shaming. They're not being shamed by anybody I've ever heard, just by themselves. And it's ridiculous. It's just look in the mirror and be fine with it, because what else do you got? What is the complaint for? What is it doing for you? It doesn't do anything for you. I don't necessarily think I'm the perfect example of the way people should look, but I don't look in the mirror and go, ugh, because it's not worth my time. It's too hard. Like, life's too hard already. Why make it? Why are you making it harder?
And why be critical of yourself? Because I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the way you look. So
right.
You're not like the Elephant Man, or whatever. And you know what? Maybe he was a very good and pure-hearted man. So, and that's kind of the point, is that everybody hopefully has something good, and if you don't, you should maybe make something good of your life.
Well, and your look is never going to be what's good.
Well, and some people are going to be critical no matter what.
Right.
And so, but it doesn't come down to that. Is this going to be, don't ask me why my alarm is going off.
I don't know.
Probably.
Well, then I don't have any questions for you if I can't ask you that.
That was the only question you had for me?
Sorry.
Do you have another collection coming up that this will be going into?
Not at this time. I don't have enough written work for another collection yet.
Is that sort of a goal, to get another collection?
I want to say yes. I have a little guilt about it, because I have a lot of incredible poet friends who don't have any books, and I have 3. And I'm like, okay. If I get an offer for one, I almost want to give it to somebody else.
But they have to write the poems and pursue that, or are these people who have lots of wonderful poetry and
They do. They have tons, and it's like the pursuit of it is weird, because I have just dumbly stumbled into all 3 of my books that I don't. When people are like, "Well, how'd you get 3 books out?" I'm like, it doesn't matter if I tell you the answer.
That's a very Gen X thing to do, to stumble into your 3 books.
Yeah, exactly. The first one I hooked up with 2 other poets who were well known in Kansas City. The second one I self-published. I guess you could do that. And the third one I won at a slam that happened to have that as a prize.
So it wasn't really stumbling into it, though. It was that you had done the work, you had met the people, you were in the places where things were happening. So, I mean, yeah, I've got lots and lots of poetry too, but I'm not necessarily out there as much as you are meeting people. And which actually brings us to, you've been very active in the Twin Cities. And I think Kansas City had a huge, profound impact on you and poetry, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. So I'm from here. I moved down there in 2011, and I only lived there for a year and a half.
But it changed a lot for you in poetry.
Yeah, I got, so the quick answer is basically there was a poetry reading where they were trying to break a record for the world's longest poetry reading. It's going to go on for over 5 days.
Whoa.
I had friends who were in it, and they wanted me to be a part of it. And I was like, I've never read to people before in my life. Okay, fine. Whatever, I'll just drink a bunch. It won't matter. And then I did it, and I met all these incredible poets. And suddenly I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing anything with poetry in the Twin Cities, and I wasn't. I didn't know any poets here, not a single one. And now it's like I know hundreds. It's weird because I got that experience down in KC. I got to run a couple of shows. I had a book under my belt. I came back here, started meeting people, started, talking poetry with people. And now, I have my own show. It's a well-known show. It's been going for 5 years. Not under my belt. I've only been doing it for 1 year. But I'm doing other things, though, and I'm trying to promote poetry. I put together other random shows. I just did a show the day before Valentine's Day where me and some poets did breakup poems. So that was kind of fun, and there was no rhyme or reason to it.
Define a breakup poem for our listeners.
Oh, just any poem about breaking up with somebody or being broken up with or love falling apart.
For some reason, I thought you were talking about something else, the concept where I think it's where one person reads a poem and then the next person reads a poem that has a simple theme. What is the name of that?
Oh, I don't know. That's if you're ever asking me about a form name, I don't know. Because I don't know anything about forms.
It's not a form. It's where one person basically plays off the next.
I've never done that. That sounds like fun, though.
Actually, I'm positive you have at Poets and Pints. I'll have to think about what it was called.
Oh, the Segway Open Mic thing.
Segway Open Mic.
That's yeah. Poetry Uno, as I called it.
Okay.
But yeah, that was fun. No, this was just people doing their heartbreak poems. And, I did poems that were 25 years old. Like, it was just fun. It was just it was a show about breaking up, and it was the day before Valentine's Day. That's why I did it.
Nice.
Appropriate. So, one of the things I love, you've been very active in the Twin Cities, is your free poetry performance workshop. Can you tell our 5.3 million listeners, we've just gained some, about what inspired that and what makes a good poetry performance?
It's funny, whenever somebody asks me this, I sound like such a bitter old man. But the reason why I started the poetry performance workshop is I got tired of going to poetry readings that were boring. Oh my God. I can't. Poetry in itself is not interesting enough. Maybe it is for some people. Maybe some people are so into the word that they will just sit there for it. I am not. I am a fidgety dude, and you got to give me something, or I am probably actually looking at my phone in the back of the room because so I was like, I'm trying to make poetry readings less boring. Everybody can be more interesting. You don't have to do what I do, and that's why I don't give people an example of what I do at those things until the end, because the point isn't to become me.
Yeah.
I don't know how I learned to become me, but I did. But you can liven up even what you're trying to do. So that's why I always ask you to read it the way you think you're supposed to read it first, like however you think you should read it, and then we work from there. I don't look at the poem and say, okay, here's what you should do, because that's not going to do anything for anybody.
Well, you have that background in acting. So I think we are getting really close to wrapping up. I have one more question. What is it that drives your passion for promoting poetry?
Besides mild narcissism, it would be just the fact that there's a lot of people out there that I know are good writers, and they don't feel like they have an opportunity to shine. And so that's why at Poets and Pints, we don't audition people. You sign up to be on the show, and eventually I'll put you on. It's just a waiting list. It's not an audition, because if you bomb up there, it's not my fault.
I mean, I didn't think you auditioned, but I thought that you did sort of choose, people that you happen to know were good readers, good speakers, whatever.
And no, because we don't have people, we typically don't repeat people. There have been a few people who have repeated and been on more than once, but for the most part, in 5 years, it's been all new people every month. And the whole point is that you just get to shine for your 10 minutes. And the only sort of picking and choosing I do is I try to make sure that I have a diverse show. So honestly, if you're out there and you want to be on the show, you can sign up on the Cracked Walnut website. But just know that if you're a white person, you might have to wait longer to be on the show, because we're trying to make sure it's diverse. And there's a lot of people that have already signed up, and we're just trying to get it done.
Okay, fantastic. So we are ready to wrap up. Michael, what are your links? Where can people find you online?
Me, they can find at aperfectpint.net and aperfectpint on all of the socials except Twitter. And Tony, where can they find you?
I am, my personal site, if you just want to see my work, my photography and my writing, is mentalvalley.com. And then my Poets and Pints is at crackwalnut.com/Poets and Pints. And that's with the word "and" spelled out, even though we use an ampersand on our boards, on all of our ads. It's spelled out in the web because you can't use an ampersand.
Web addresses won't let you use the ampersand.
Right. And then there is also the Poets and Pints Facebook page. So facebook.com/group/Poets and Pints, again with the "and" spelled out. And then also I do Writers Read, which is another series that we do at the coffee house or the coffee shop Northeast. I got to give Rich that plug because that coffee shop's amazing. And we do that. And that series is for writers of all types, not just poets. Laura's been on that
I've been
show.
There. I've read there.
So it's a fun show. I took that over last year also. And that's obviously, shut down. That would be next week if we were under normal times, but it's not happening.
Yeah, that is a neat venue. So you can find me at laura.vosica.author at Facebook. At Twitter, I'm twitter.com/Laura Vosica. I'm on Instagram, probably under the same name. I don't use it much. And then my book website is bluebellschronicles.com or lauravosica.com, takes you to the same place. And Michael, I guess you have
we are at booksandbrews.net or Book Brews on Instagram.
One book, many brews.
One book, many brews. Tony, I know we've already talked about some things that you've got coming up, but if you want to just go over again, where can people see you coming up? I know the one thing is not happening, except it might be virtual, but you said something about a Poets and Pints coming up.
Yes, so always check the Poets and Pints Facebook page. I forgot to mention we also have, if you search Writers Read MN or Facebook Poets and Pints on Instagram, we're on there as well. But anyway, but keep your eye on the Facebook page the most, because that's where we have the most updated calendar, what we're doing. But also right now, because of COVID-19, we are having poets do their own 10-minute poetry shows. So they just go on there, they go Facebook Live, I approve it. They read some poems for you, and then they stop the video. So you go on there. There's 4 or 5 poets right now. I'm trying to get more, and I'm just going to keep adding them on there. And then I'm going to probably do a show on the 15th, which would be the normal night of our show, April 15th, and via Zoom, where we can have up to 100 people in it. So here's hoping that we can do that.
Information on how to find that will be on the website.
It won't be on the website. It'll be on the Facebook page, honestly. Right.
Yeah, it'll be on our Books and Brews website and on our YouTube channel, too. So what I have coming up, I think in May and July, something like that, my presentation of Scotland in the Eyes of the Author. If my chainmail ever arrives in the mail, and by chainmail I don't mean a threatening letter, I mean what knights wore. I am also collecting submissions for Startled by Nature, which is the 2020 poetry anthology of traditional forms of poetry. And I bet you want to know who's coming next month.
Yes, we do.
Of course you do. Of course you do. You were just waiting to ask. Judith Granahan writes books about strong, intelligent, inventive women who get in trouble. The question is, who will survive, who won't? Granahan creates novels full of compelling characters dealing with mystery, danger, thrills, romance, horror, and difficult choices. In her debut novel, Dancers of the Third Age, Anna May plants her feet squarely on her husband's grave, looks around the cemetery, she sees she's the only person alive, slips her husband's pistol out of her pocket, and shoots where his head would be under the gravestone, then fires over and over. Later, sharing a terrible secret with 2 quasi-friends, Anna May goes with them to try to rectify the mistake she made so long ago. In See That House, published last fall, Kate McKenzie discovers $1 million missing from the company she works for in the wake of a colleague dying in a fiery crash in the mountains. As Kate tries to sort out the mistaken payroll, she realizes neither the missing money nor the car crash were mistakes, and she might be next. So Judy is going to be fun. She has been in my writers group with me for, the 13 years I've been in there. She's been in a lot longer, so I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for checking out COVID-19, official COVID-19 episode number 1. Hopefully there won't be a COVID-19 episode number 2, but we will see what happens next month. This has been episode 12 of Books and Brews. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks, Tony, for coming.